In this video, we are going to discuss about clustering. So now let's get to the formal definition of clustering. Clustering is nothing, it's the task of grouping similar objects. Grouping. So now, what is similar objects grouping? So it's nothing but every object is denoted by some of the attributes. For example, age, gender, and other things. Right? So if we have a collection of objects, for example, we have 100 different objects and they have 5 different features, we can group them by based on certain features. For example, if we consider gender as a feature, we can group these objects by gender. Now let's take an example of it. Suppose we are in a class in which we have 60 students. Now 30 are male and 30 are female. So how are we going to group them? So let's plot them here. So these are males and these are females. And the color denotes their gender. So it means bluish, somewhat bluish means girls, and somewhat creamy means boys. So now what we can do is we can plot a line around them and we can see that girls have one feature set, boys have one feature set, and now we have two clusters. So this is a basic example of what a clustering is. So we can find similar example in our day-to-day life in which we can see like for example demographics. By demographics I mean population. So certain regions have larger population than others. So we can group regions by their population. For example, these states have larger population and these states have less population than the others. So let's take a life example. So what we are going to do is we are going to go into one of the image that we are having right now, and this map contains the countries by their population, right? So which are the countries which have higher population? So India is one of such country, China is another, United States is similar. So as you can see, let me just go back. So as you can see that there are certain countries where the density of the population will be higher, and in Europe the density of the population would be lower. So we can just classify them like like the Asian countries are probably in the subcontinent region are the high density one, and the European one are the low density one. So this is one such example of clustering in which we can have a high density population group and low density population group and a mediate or moderate density population group. So another example we can took is probably a Facebook or LinkedIn. Now, what example can we took from that? So there are two examples that we can took from that. The first example is like in this image here is that it is showing like the regions which are using certain kind of app for social networks. As you can see in the bluish region, Facebook is more popular. In greenish region it's WeChat, VK in orange one, and the Instagram is another like here. So if we are going to group this region by color, we can see that this region will be together and like this region will be different and this region will be alone. Like we have a cluster of like 150 odd countries, we have a cluster of single country and a cluster of single country, right? So this is one example of Facebook. Now what's the another example of Facebook? So this is a more interesting example. So as we all know that in Facebook, let me just erase that first. So we all know that in Facebook, suppose this is US, this is Europe, and this is Asia, and this is Africa, right? So what happens is, in US the user will be interacting with each other more, like this user, they will be exchanging messages and interacting on each other post more as compared to users in Europe, like, and here is a different cluster. So what will be happening here is that the users in US, Asia, Europe and Africa, so the Europe will be interacting with each other more, and Asian will be interacting with each other more, and the African will be interacting with each other more. So this is a tight cluster which is forming here, right? But that doesn't mean that these people are not interacting. They will be interacting, but a little bit. And similarly here as well, similarly here as well. And within each country, like for example, let's take US as well, right? It contains various states. So what will happen is the user inside the state will be interacting with each other more as compared to interstate communication. So what you are having here is, this is a small cluster in which we are communicating. This is another small cluster in which you are communicating, and then you form a bigger cluster in which they are communicating, and similarly there will be another big cluster in which they are communicating, and this is another cluster. So you are having, series of cluster in which at each layer there's a tightly coupled community, and if you go a level above there will be a loosely coupled community, but it would be tightly coupled but loosely coupled as compared to this, right? And as you go lower you will have a hierarchy. So this problem is community detection. We are going to discuss it in detail later, but for now this is just a general introduction of what clustering is about, and with a few examples. You can find many examples in day-to-day life.